morning when a man walked to the middle of the avenue of eternal peace.
Well, all right. Welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Well, today we're going to talk about, can you stand up to a country? Can you stand up to the government? I kind of compare it to militias and stuff, but is there a way for a small group of people or whatever to actually stand up, or even a whole country if your leaders kind of go rogue and things get a little hysterical and tyranny? There's been times in history that people have stood up and rose up. Like, it turns out that's where America came from. But you always hear when people talk about the Second Amendment, that's one of the big times I always hear it pointed out, is they're like, well, why do you need your guns to stand up to tyranny? Because you'll never be able to stand up to a giant government. So I kind of wanted to dig into it. Like, could you stand up to a government? Like, is it even possible? Um, I know Biden had that quote of, if you want to fight a country, you're going to need an F-15. And to be honest, that sounds pretty reasonable to me to be, like, it takes something. But has it been done in history? Have people really stood up when you're the little guy? There's David and Goliath, right? That's like one of the all time, classic, and Rocky. That guy, forget about it, so it happens. Let's talk about it. So first, I think you could stand up to a country with ideas. And I think that's honestly one of the most powerful things. And I think it would probably take a combination to stand up, of tactics to stand up to a tyrannical government. And I kind of want to lay out a case, and we'll discuss some pros and cons. And if it's possible, feasible, I don't know. Sometimes right has to prevail, or we end up in an ugly world. If, evil and tyranny always win, but I know that evil and tyranny can last for a long time. It takes a little bit to stand up sometimes. So, Kevin, has there been examples in history of people standing up to the government with ideas?
Yeah, so that's happened a lot of times, right? You mentioned Gandhi in India, nonviolence. That was one of the things that he supported.
Now, that did take 32 years.
It took a long time, yeah, and there are a lot of Indians that non-violently got beaten to death. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't just, it wasn't both sides were non-violent. It was just the one side. A lot of people say that the civil rights movement was a largely peaceful movement. They did shoot Martin Luther King, and it was probably the government that did it.
Yeah, probably. But how about the people who are protesting are not violent? It doesn't mean the reaction
right
is not violent, right?
Yeah,
No,
but
I'm
I would say that through nonviolence, that Martin Luther King made a big change in the American culture as far as civil rights go. Malcolm X was not the same nonviolent advocate, but there's a lot of nonviolent groups and organizations that took place during the 60s that helped the civil rights movement. And then there's a continual flow of free speech that's constantly changing the government and the way people view the world, just on a day-to-day basis. Whether you see it as being a drastic change or not, it's still incremental changes over the past 30 years, I'm sure, or the past 200 years. I'm sure if you and I were talking to somebody from 1790 in the United States, we'd be like, wow, that dude's kind of racist.
right.
We'd probably have some differing opinions on certain things, but things change over time, through, as long as you have open and free discussions, right? Things can progress. You can change people's minds, and you can have your mind changed.
Absolutely. I think we all kind of evolve and grow and change, over the years, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. I feel like we can be manipulated by media. We can, have our ideas changed in our passion. A lot of politicians seem to change their mind from year to year,
Mhm.
sometimes from their election campaign into their service. They change
Yeah.
their minds. You know, it
Well,
happens, right? We all kind of evolve and change. Um, but there's also things like oath keepers and stuff like that where I mean, I know people kind of associate them with like militias and hardcores and like that, but I think
mhm,
also just reminding to hold people accountable is a good thing. Like saying, "Hey, how cool would it be if a bunch of cops were kind of reminded that, hey, you took an oath and a promise to defend freedom. You should be accountable to that." I don't think that means anything about violence or anything like that. I think that means, hey, know where you stand, kind of drawing your line. And to be honest, I think debate is a big thing about nonviolent resistance to the government. I think that actually putting good ideas that are rooted in logic and reason, you can change people's minds. I think
mhm,
you can start to sway people and actually influence outcomes. And I think by having that public debate and discussion, you can kind of shape culture and win over hearts and minds. And honestly, if a bunch of people are resistant to bad ideas in a government, you might be able to really have a foothold. So I think ideas and shaping culture. Now, obviously, we've seen a lot in history, excuse me, where people will shut down free speech. They'll shut down debate and public discussion. Um, and they'll maybe censor news organizations or newspapers or websites, right? Demanding to take down Twitter or demanding to take down X, right?
mhm,
Wherever the thing goes in society, or saying, oh, Facebook, you need to start censoring things, or YouTube, don't let them say any of these type of things. Any of that type of stuff you can limit the public discussion and discord and shut it down, and then people start to feel helpless. And when they start to feel helpless, they sometimes turn to violence, and that's a thing. I mean, I don't know, when it comes to violence, could a little guy stand up to a big tyrannical government? We don't have F-15s as individuals. We're not allowed to have F-15s and whatever. I mean, I think we're like up to like F-22 Raptor and different
yeah.
things. We'll pass that a little bit.
F-15, that's old news,
Old news, right?
F-15, come on.
And they
Out of
actually have
date,
some
bro.
new
That's
ones that are even crazier.
yeah.
The new jets are amazing. But we also have, I mean, if we're still on ideas for a minute, look at the Spartans, King Leonidas, that whole thing. You
Mhm,
still have the idea of a small group standing up against people. And I got to say, individuals, sometimes if you have a strong idea or belief behind you, that can motivate an army and really change outcomes. You think of movies like Braveheart, these are based in history of, smaller groups standing up because they're passionate and they care.
mhm.
That fighting for what you believe in can sometimes bring about a lot more passion. So let's kind of shift into a little more of the kind of armed resistance. Now, how would we fare with that? Like, is that even
Sure,
possible?
sure. Well, I think that, in small confrontations, generally speaking, you can be legally in the United States, you can be pretty heavily armed, you know? Um, you can have weapons that you can quickly turn into automatic weapons, It's not like it's top secret information how to do it. It's not difficult. I know a lot of people that talk about banning firearms, the people that support
Yes.
getting rid of firearms. They don't seem to realize that you can make that in your basement. It's not like high tech information how to build a firearm. It's not like you know like this is some advanced technology.
Yeah, but Kevin, we could stop the sale of primers and gunpowder, and then you'll run out of bullets. All right.
It's true. It's true. You can ban all sorts of stuff, but ultimately,
But then
you
we'll
know,
be out there with crossbows, right?
yeah, you
So
can. Yeah, it's not. But irregardless of all of that stuff, I think in small groups and small situations, a small group can have a pretty significant impact. Um, I mean, Ruby Ridge, it was just basically it was two guys and
yeah,
a family, and
yeah,
held off the government for I don't know weeks. I don't know
weeks.
how long it was.
It was a while.
It was several months before they even had somebody go up there to try and you know
That
try
would
and
be
get him.
1992. Randy Weaver in Idaho, federal agents. It did end up deadly and ended badly for him and his family.
Yeah, he
But
survived.
well, yeah, but it still ended badly. I don't know if you're
No, I don't.
happy
Yeah,
with that outcome.
yeah,
And
no,
then
I don't. I think he would
later,
have been better off, you know, not being uh tricked by the government to do something illegal so they can charge you with a crime.
right?
Probably would have been better off
Then you
there.
had Waco, and that was 51 days at Waco
Hmm.
that they kind of held off the federal government. Now, again, were they holding them off with combat tactics, or really they were holding them off where it wouldn't look good on TV if we went in and killed a bunch of women and children.
Right,
That's
right.
the
So they just
you know,
waited 2 months and
right.
then went in and killed a bunch of women and
Yeah,
children.
because
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like, I mean, could the US government have just gone and like dropped a bomb on them, right? I mean,
yeah,
legally, no, but could they do it? Yeah, they could
yeah.
just go in and shut it down and be like, no,
Physically, they could have. Yeah, they could have
you
just driven a couple of
don't
tanks in
have that.
there and
And now
leveled
we'll talk
everything.
about like predator drones and things like that. That's a whole other, that's the world has changed since 1993. Um, so then you have the Bundy Ranch standoff, and that was
Right.
like 2014 and then 2017. Um,
Yeah. So
but
let me just we'll hit on that real quick.
yeah,
Occupation of the Mahler National Wildlife Refuge.
yes,
That's the I think that was the second one. That was 2016.
right.
Um,
And
an armed
basically
group
yeah, go ahead.
right wing militants seized and performed an adverse occupation of the
So,
headquarters of the Mahler National Wildlife Refuge in
right.
Oregon.
And that was because it basically was they were confronted by the Bureau of Land Management
Hmm.
over unpaid grazing fees of
Right.
basically going on federal land and letting your animals, graze and then
Right.
not
Federal
pay
land, also known as public land,
public,
also
right?
known as something that the public can use, but not
Kevin, do
as
you
long
not
as you.
pay when you go to the public park? Do you not sometimes have to pay, like when they have a beach area and they're like $10 to come in and we
I
maintain
mean,
it?
no, I
Oh,
don't sometimes pay that.
okay.
I don't ever pay that. No,
No,
I mean
you're not an
then there
intake.
is places that will charge you a fee to use the public land.
All right.
Uh,
Well, I think the
I just
yeah.
go the other way because apparently there's more than one way to walk into someplace, and I just never go through the place where they're asking for money.
Ah, that's the trick. All right. So when
Mhm.
there's a guy with a gate and a pole and, hey, you need to stop here. All right.
Or there's a big music festival that backs
Right.
up to state land, and you can just walk over a mountain and walk into the music festival for
Yeah,
free.
there's that. Right.
You know,
So the Bundys owed over $1 million, and it lasted from
in
April.
illegal fees,
Right.
or I
In
guess, I mean,
in yeah, why see,
legal,
Kevin, you
legal.
put in your the federal government would have to argue on that one.
Yeah,
April 5th to April 12th, and ended with the BLM suspending its cattle roundup and releasing the impounded animals, which Bundy and his allies viewed as a major victory against federal overreach. And I got to say, sometimes the government needs you to push back,
right.
right?
I 100% agree with that.
They need a little pushback every now and again.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like the government, both state and federal government, needs to be reminded sometimes. Even county governments need to be reminded sometimes that they're you know supposed to be governing for the people, by the people, not against the people. But
Now, they rounded up, like, they basically reached out to, like, Oath Keepers. They reached out to the 3%ers, and basically all the patriot groups just kind of really got behind the whole Bundy thing. And how many militia people are there even, like, suspected in the US?
yeah,
Like, what are
so
we looking?
estimated in the United States, there's 60,000 members of a militia. Not, that's all of them.
Now that doesn't, like, we could say that, every capable male could be a member of the militia was
Well,
kind of the
I
yeah.
should point this out. So there is technically a Congress approved definition for an
Okay.
organized militia,
All right.
which
Now
is
organized. Yep.
organized militia specifically is the National Guard.
All right.
That's basically run by states, and an unorganized militia, which is every able-bodied man 17 to 45 years old, and that would be under state control.
Right. I think that
So
that
that
sounds
I
right.
mean, Congress says blatantly, explicitly, that American militia is every person 17 to 45.
Now these
Every
people are
man.
supposed to be fighting for America, in support of America, Kevin.
American ideals.
Oh, American ideals.
The
All
American
right.
people, maybe not
All right.
necessarily the American government. I mean, the American
Oh,
government
okay.
wants that to be the case.
Right. All right. Now I'm going to show you something here. Look at there's the US military. No, you said 60,000 in an organized militia.
Right.
US military, those numbers are a little different. We're basically at 450,000 active duty Army, 330,000 active duty Navy. They don't even mention the Coast Guard because, come on, really.
Right.
But Space Force, 9,000. Air Force, 66,000. Air National Guard, 105,000. So bigger than the Air Force. And then the Marines, about 173,000 Marines. Active Air Force, 314,000. And National Guard, 325,000. So the federal government has a lot of resources available.
Yeah, it's almost a 2 million man army if you were
Right.
to combine all those.
So obviously standing up, 60,000 against 2 million man, that's a little different, right? And obviously training, the US military is going to win out all day, right? Size, we just said, they're going to win out all day. But
Higher
sometimes ideas can make a big difference. Now, I like to think that you could walk into like any job and we'll say out of like 100 people, there might be like 7 people who kind of actually get stuff done there.
Do the work, yeah.
And do the work. Like you guys maybe have seen this in your own workplace and things like that. I like to think that the people who would be in a militia would be the kind of guys who are I'm going to take charge. They are those guys. That's my own idea. But you could also easily make an argument saying, well, Chuck, you know what? There's probably 7 of those guys that kind of run everything and get it done. But I like to think that they're the doers. Let's just say that. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, the next argument you could make is, well, Chuck, let me tell you about Army Rangers. Let me tell you that every one of those guys is a doer. And I would say, you know what? You're probably right. And if you said, Chuck, let me tell you about the Navy SEALs. Every one of those guys is a doer. And, and all these other, special forces guys, right? They're the doers. And you know what? I don't take nothing away from that. I 100% agree that you're going to have Navy SEALs that are going to be 1,000 times better than, or, maybe 5-10 times better than any militia guy. And I say that because there's a lot of these militia guys are veterans. They are these former guys as well. But I think when it comes down to ideas, I think when you get elite soldiers, these are also people who have core convictions and core values and actually believe in freedom in America, I would even say. Now, obviously, you can have skilled bad guys. That does happen. Like in a movie, I always see like they're always like albinos and stuff.
That's right. That's how you know they're evil.
That's how you know they're
Everybody
evil.
knows that all albinos, gingers, there are people out there that are born without souls.
Right,
And,
sure.
they're just naturally evil people.
Right. So there's those. I mean, that's a given, right?
Right.
But in general, I would like to think that a lot of the special forces guys are going to kind of make choices and decide where to be based on values and convictions. And honestly, a lot of the guys that I've met have some pretty great values and pretty great convictions.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying there might not be as much of a firm opposition as you think. And that's where I think it's that combination of hearts and minds in addition to, having a military militia. Now, another thing, like one of the biggest things that's so scary to everybody is, well, there's like predator drones, and man, drones are amazing. They can just go out and do amazing things and take down,
Yeah.
you know, huge things. But, and I would also say, controlling the internet, communication, information, and cyber attacks, things like that. These things can also be controlled in a militia kind of level, right? So maybe they don't have predator drones, but I got to say, there's some hackers out there, and there's some different hacker groups that do a lot of crazy things out there.
Hmm.
There was one called Anonymous, you maybe heard of.
Yep.
There are several others, throughout time here that they've actually been able to accomplish quite a bit and kind of bring people to their knees on things. Now, I know you're saying, well, I don't know because, everything still goes on. There was one called LulzSec
Hmm.
in about 2011 that was group of basically a offshoot of Anonymous. They basically breached Sony Pictures, PBS, giving out their data. You remember pissed off North Korea or something. And
Yep. Yep.
yeah. There's also the cult of the dead cow was a big thing, based out of Texas, back in the 80s, around 84 they started, and they developed tools like Black Orifice for like remote access. I mean, but bottom line is there's a lot of civilian groups that our government tries to go and like hijack, I guess, co-op these people into going on. There was one called Morpho, a cyber espionage group with possible US ties, active in 2010, targeted tech firms, Apple, Microsoft, property theft, that kind of thing. But I'm just saying it's possible that these people might be part of an army that stood up to a corrupt government. Um, and with that, these things can be a game changer. There are lots of instances, and I think one of the biggest things, you ever watch like a show like The Sopranos or something, and you're just shocked and amazed at the brutal violence that sometimes it seems like that's how those mafia guys always used to. They weren't like ninjas or like Bruce Lee. You see like Tony Soprano, he's like the out of shape old guy and whatever, and he ends up like, but it's the brutality, you know, the the quick aggressive thing. I think that would become a factor. I think the guy who's willing to be brutal. I know that a lot of time governments um, kind of fight with one hand tied behind their back. I know that was a big thing, with the outcome of the Afghan war and stuff like that, and things with Al Qaeda was. I feel like they were very limited, the U.S. government, in how they were able to fight that war, as far as rules of engagement and things like that. And then there's also like, you know, ethics and morals and how you do things. Those can get in the way of aggressively fighting a war. Kevin, thoughts?
Yeah, I think William Sherman, who's the famous Civil War general, said war is hell, and the the more brutal it is, the faster it's over.
I think that's right.
I think that that is the way you would want to win a war, is by being aggressive and violent and brutal and awful. And you win wars by killing people. You don't win wars you don't die for your country. You don't win a war by dying for your country, right? As Patton famously said, you win a war by making the other bastard die for his.
There you go.
So I mean, I think that there's definitely something to that. You don't expect the American government to treat American civilians that way, though. American citizens. You want Americans. You want your government to, if anything, take care of you, not push you around and boss you around. Now, taking what the government scope of taking care of somebody is a lot different, maybe to my mind, versus somebody that's on the far left or on the far right. But I think that a lot of these militias, a lot of the guys that are in these militias are they're people that maybe have different beliefs than I do, but they also at the same time have a solid belief system that is not going out and just violently attacking people or not committing acts of terrorism. Timothy McVeigh was in a militia before he did the Oklahoma City bombing.
And I would agree that's not a tactic that I would support or get behind.
But the militia that he was in also, denounced it. That's not, that's not how you go about protecting people, is by killing them, right?
Absolutely.
And there have been many acts of terrorism that have been committed by, and I say far right, but that's only because militias are oftentimes, most of the time, far right groups.
I feel like you're right leaning if you like guns, and it kind of goes hand in hand with militia.
Yeah. And I think the one of the earliest militias was the what were they called? The Posse Comitatus, which was in the late 1960s. It was kind of a white nationalist group, but really militias kind of took off after the Waco situation.
I thought you were going to go back to like the Sons of Liberty and the militias and the
whatever. But but I mean, a lot of white right-wing militia groups are white nationalist or like extreme Christian groups in the United States. I mean, go to different countries and you're going to find extremists in all kinds of situations having all sorts of military groups. I think the largest militia in the world is Hamas, and that's definitely not what we would consider a
not somebody you align your values with, Kevin.
Right. So people in militias, I think, feel like they're standing up to protect their family and their community, and I don't think that that's a bad thing.
Right. Now another thought, another direction. I feel like one of the ways that governments keep people from being a strong concern, I'm trying to think of the right word here, the way they try and keep the man down, if you will, is by keeping us divided.
Right.
And as long as we hate each other, like as long as the left half hates the right half, then you don't hate the guy in charge. Because he's not like, I mean, I understand, Chuck, they tried to assassinate that president guy. Right. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, if we're focusing our hate on, this half of the country is the problem.
Right.
And no, it's the other half of the country that's the problem. Then we're not like, it's the guys in charge that are the problem.
Yeah.
So
I can tell you this, if you're very conservative and you talk to your very liberal neighbor,
yes,
have a lot in common. You'd probably be great drinking buddies. You know what I mean? But you're like, his beliefs are so crazy. And, a lot of these people really think that the people on the other side are absolutely insane.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
I can't even talk to them, but try. Have you tried talking to them? Because they're pretty reasonable people on both sides, you know.
Like me and
And
Kevin actually have a whole show together.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you probably didn't realize this, but sometimes we have different opinions.
yeah.
You probably don't
Very
know.
different opinions on certain things.
Like
Absolutely.
we're able to put on this beautiful face that is the Survival and Basic Badass podcast.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes we actually disagree on issues. Like, before every show, we're like, all right, well, listen, this is wrong and whatever. And, and we
Mhm.
debate things. But that's the beauty. I mean, we still somehow show up every week and don't hate each other.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun, honestly. You know, having spirited discussions is a lot of fun, and it's great disagreeing with somebody. You know, sometimes you hear a different point of view, a different perspective, and oh shit, actually, maybe what I was thinking is way off base, and you can usually talk shit out.
Usually.
Sometimes you can't.
There you go. Now you're
Sometimes you
picking up
can't.
what I'm putting down.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's the thing. As long as we're divided, you're never going to be able to, really stand up on things. But again, maybe it's a civil war, right? Maybe it goes like that. But the bottom line is, if you look at all these things in combination of ideas and, and actual resistance, we talked about violence, we talked about cyber attacks, and we talk about drones and all these things. The combination, I think the biggest thing, at least in my mind, is ideas, right? Changing hearts and minds with ideas is really the answer. And people, I think, know the truth in their heart, and they know what's like, have kind of a inert sense of, is it inert? Is that the right word of right and
Innate.
wrong? Innate. That would sounds better. I like
Yeah.
that word definitely better. So that's it. I knew I was wrong. I just didn't know how to get there. That's the thing. So, but that's it. In your heart, kind of right and wrong. And it's probably not going out and hurting innocent people who aren't hurting other people. That's
Yeah.
probably a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you would end up being like a psycho, serial killer, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
murderer. That you don't want to be those things. That would
Yeah.
be bad. You want to be somebody who cares and looks out for the little guy, those who can't protect themselves. What's that that movie with Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men, right? At
Mm-hmm.
the end, the Marines are like, "Oh, we're being blamed. We didn't do anything. It was really the general, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And then the one Marine says to the less bright Marine, he's like, "No, it was our job to look out for the little guy and those who couldn't protect
Mm-hmm.
themselves."
Yeah.
It's kind of a thing. I mean, it
That's the
turns out,
problem, right? He said we didn't do anything. That's the problem. You didn't do anything.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is sometimes the people in charge are like, just do this. And sometimes you need to stand up for what's right and have some core values. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying that might be a thing. So you have thoughts, concerns, comments? We'd love to hear about it. That's the thing, maybe, Rambo did too that one time, did stand up. I'm just saying, there sometimes one guy
Mm-hmm.
can make all the difference. But
Even if it's a movie.
just putting yeah, you ruined it there. But
Well, I mean, there are real people like John Brown was a
Audie Murphy,
Audie Murphy. These were all Rambos.
all the Rambos in real life. So all right, we didn't have to give it to Stallone. We could just keep referencing Audie Murphy.
But I mean, Rocky. I mean,
Yeah,
seriously.
but nobody
Good.
remembers Audie Murphy anymore.
No.
You and me were the last ones who even know what that name means. Some of you guys should look it up, check it out. Anyway, thoughts, concerns, things you would like to hear about, get our take on, email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com, and we would be happy to, answer those questions and get to the bottom of things. But with that, stay safe, and I will talk to you guys next week. Maybe, if I can end it.